Hey folks, welcome back to the Firefighters Podcast. Today's a really unique episode when I speak to Ben Kelly, who's a brand new recruit, has just been accepted into Wholetime with Staffordshire, which is a fire service based here in the UK. Ben has wanted to be a firefighter since he was a very young child, and he even references on the back of one of his birthday cards where his mom wrote, Ben wants to be a firefighter, and I think that was when he was 3 years of age. Ben's never lost sight of that dream, and he speaks about how he has developed and almost accidentally designed his own education, his schooling, and also his extracurricular activities, some of his experiences, some of his volunteer work, prepare him for the possibility of joining the fire service. Ben goes into detail about the recruitment process, how many times he had to apply, because like so many of us, it didn't happen first time, how difficult it was, who inspired him, what lessons did he learn, and also about his schooling and his education. Ben actually did a bachelor's honours in fire and rescue. Now, I hadn't even heard of that until a few years ago, and it's incredible to see what they study as part of this. Ben takes us through the entire curriculum and some real in-depth stuff. It blew my mind how much depth they go into. We talk about leadership, we talk about hazmat, we talk about fire safety. It's a really, really great course that he's been on. And ultimately, we're going to say how that prepared Ben fantastically well for his final attempt and where he became successful in being recruited for Staffordshire Fire Service. Ben is in the process of waiting to begin his whole-time recruitment course and will be operational next year. This is a really good episode for anybody that's trying to prepare themselves for applying for the fire service, so listen in. But before that, let's listen to our friends and family from the Firefighters Podcast. First up, we have our good friends over at William Wood Watches. Johnny and the team have been working hard, continuing to beat on their craft, creating some of the most overwhelmingly beautiful watches as they continue to become the leading British watch brand that upcycles rescue service materials. Let's not forget, they also give a hell of a lot back to the international firefighting charities as well as the firefighter charity right here in the UK. Now, I know, like me, you're already aware of this, and I know you're super excited, but I'm going to say it again. Their new Triumph collection. With the overwhelming success of the Valiant, the Bronze, and the Chivalrous collection, I'm saving up the pennies currently to get myself one. Head over to WilliamWoodWatches.com to find out more about the business, the history of William Wood, who, by the way, was a late grandfather of the owner. Dude was in the British Fire Service for 25 years. He won commendations for his bravery and passed away, unfortunately, in 2009. This is such an authentic story behind this brand. I know you're going to love it, so head over to WilliamWoodWatches.com. Literally, as I stand in front of you today, I've got my Valiant collection watch on with the red strap. Loving it, feeling ready to go out there, kick ass and take names with the pulse of the fire service right there on my wrist. So if you, like me, love the fire service, love the emergency services, and want to be part of a brand that is giving money to the firefighters charities every single time somebody gets their hands on one of these beautiful timepieces, then head over to WilliamWoodWatches.com right now. This episode is also sponsored by Venari Group, the specialists in vehicle building. More specifically, our emergency services vehicles on the front line every single day. So whether it's ambulances, fire appliances, healthcare, equipment, you know what we're like in the emergency services with our toys. And Venari are at the absolute forefront of technology and innovation when it comes to bringing that British manufacturing mastery to the forefront. In February this year, they proudly announced the exciting partnership with Ford to release a technologically advanced lightweight 3.5-ton ambulance. Venari heads into production with this beautiful new vehicle in 2021, known as Project Siren. Yes, that sounds bloody good, doesn't it? The NHS themselves have had some direct input into this, so you know Venari have gone to the front line, got the feedback, got the information from the boys and girls. What do they need? How do they need it? And they have made this stunning new vehicle, fit for purpose, fit for the end user. So a big thanks to Wes, Oliver, and James for bringing together their work ethic, desire, and skill set to benefit all of our frontline emergency workers, giving them the tools for the job every single day. And that's the team that makes the podcast great. So let's get ready to jump in there with Ben. Get a pen and paper at the ready. You're going to want to listen to this one a few times. There are so many knowledge bombs that get dropped. For anyone preparing for interviews, preparing for testing, preparing for recruitment in general, pick up all of the tips and the tricks and the nuggets of knowledge that are shared on today's episode. Thank you for coming back to the Firefighters Podcast. Let's buckle up for safety, eyes down, and I will see you on the other side. Ben Kelly, welcome to the Firefighters Podcast. How you doing, brother?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
I'm awesome, mate. Now, I wanted to get you on because you've had a recent success that's something you've been working towards for a very long time, but just to sort of lead us in with an overarching theme, in the last 2 or 3 years, the UK Fire Service has gone through a massive amount of recruitment. Even just around the East Midlands, I've seen most brigades, or a lot of brigades certainly, taking on 20, 30, 40 or so whole-time firefighters last year, this year, and I think there's a few are going to continue on again next year as well. And you have recently successfully been recruited for Staffordshire Wholetime, is that right?
Yep, that's correct. So I'll start early 2022.
That's the thing that you and I were talking about the other day, which really blew my mind, because you're in a really unique position where you're a sort of a COVID recruit, if we can use that term. And it's not the first time you've gone for this as well. It wasn't a spur of the moment thing. It wasn't a COVID induced desire to apply for the fire service. This is something you've been going after for a long time. When did you first want to join the fire service, and what inspired you to go for a career in it?
Well, always wanted to be a firefighter. But in all honesty, I haven't got a clue why. It was just something that little Ben, he was always dead focused on. My mum actually writes on my birthday cards. So when I was little, I've got my 3rd birthday card, and on the back she's written, Ben has said he wants to be a firefighter. And ever since then, it's just something I've followed.
Wow. I said a lot of stuff when I was that age, and thank God my mum didn't hold me to it, because I'm not sure I'd have still been in now. I wanted to be a puppy. I wanted to be an astronaut. I wanted to be a superhero. I think at one point I wanted to be a tree. So I'm not sure how that would have served me long term. But something inside you had always driven, so even from a young age. But what's unique about your story is it's not necessarily something you forgot about for many, many years. You've actually gone on to pursue it in a few different ways. But how difficult was it to achieve this recruitment that you've just gone through?
Yeah, it's been quite a few years in the making. I applied when I just turned 18 for staffs. They were recruiting. I was in my final year doing my A-levels, and I thought, this is going to fall perfectly, finish my A-levels over summer. And I think
I'll be ready for it. I'll just waltz straight in.
And didn't work out that way, and I was devastated, But I've applied 5 or 6 times, I think, in total.
Wow.
Around the country. Yeah, I've been working towards it for the last 3-4 years or so.
You don't see many people traveling around the country to do it anymore. I remember when I first got in, there was people going long distances, 3 or 4 hours for interviews up and down the country. It wasn't rare to hear people applying for 10, 12 services. And again, that to me says that overarching theme of perseverance and what you're willing to do to achieve this thing that you've wanted for so long. So you applied for 5 or 6 times, but you weren't just doing that. You actually made this part of your formal education as well. You did, what education did you do in terms of this?
I did my A-levels when I was 18, and then I went to university to study for a Bachelor of Science Fire and Rescue.
Bachelor's in Science of Fire and Rescue?
Yep, so I'm currently in my final year doing my dissertation.
So most people won't even know that's a thing, because up until a few years ago, I didn't even know it was a thing, but you can actually do a Bachelor's in Fire and Rescue.
Yep, so I had no clue it was a thing either until I got rejected from Staffordshire, and I didn't really know what to do because uni had never ever crossed my mind. I just thought, why would I want to pay thousands of pounds to go live in a different city and study something that I'm not going to use? Because for me, I don't know whether it was tunnel vision or what have you, but I've always been interested in the fire service. To go and study English or philosophy or something I just couldn't see myself doing it. I don't think I'd have had the discipline. I'd have been in the pub all the time and not doing any of my work. So,
which is actually a common approach, with all due respect to a lot of people in uni. But to build an entire bachelor's degree, because I think it would be hard for people to fully comprehend and break down all the aspects of what you've been studying for the past couple of years, and how, in all due respect to people that are in the service, that is going to give you a tremendous wealth of knowledge heading into your career as you start out with Staffordshire now. So what sort of stuff's included in a syllabus in a Bachelor's of Fire and Rescue?
You have 2 semesters per year, 3 modules each semester. So we've covered fire engineering, hazmat, fire law, fire safety in the built environment, fire investigation, which is probably my favourite, emergency planning, community safety and social policy. So there's been lots to go at. Yeah, it's been great.
How much of it is predominantly classroom-based or PowerPoint-based? Because I know you said you have a special interest in fire investigation there. I did my course probably 2 years ago now, and you're right, I found it absolutely fascinating in burn rates and, the sort of triangular trajectory that you see from different seats of fire in a room, and, how different burn patterns work with different chemicals, and how you can tell if doors were open or closed. What did you find most interesting about fire investigation? And can you give us some examples of what was included in that aspect of it?
Yeah, so we had some real life case studies. Our lecturer is quite a notable fire investigator within the UK, and he's an absolutely top bloke as well. He was able to give us redacted and sort of changed up case studies, obviously to protect identities and what have. But there was a few in near where I live, predominantly the West Midlands. One of our actual assignments was we were the FI, so we had plenty of photos, witness interviews from the family themselves, and we had to basically piece it all together, say where was the compartment of origin, what was the item first ignited, use all the evidence we had from the photos, witnesses, etc., and just try and build a picture of what actually went on.
So obviously protecting identities and all that sort of jazz. Could you walk us through what that case study looked like, and as much as you can remember, what was the incident and how did it unfold, and how did you get to the answer? Okay,
so it was a semi-detached house. Early hours of the morning, there was a fire. One of the kids, I think he was about 16, 17. He actually escaped from the property, and he met crews, the first two crews arriving. There was a lot of fire damage on the front door. The door was actually shut at time of arrival. And then inside the stairs, it looked like it had flashed over.
When you say it was shut on time of arrival, do you get that from CCTV evidence, or did that come from a witness statement, or did you note that from your investigation?
Overall witness statements and the actual fire crews.
Okay.
They said it was quite, from a lot of the fires we'd actually looked at, there wasn't a lot of fire damage on the outside of the front door.
Okay.
But whereas with this one, that there was, and that was something notable.
Why was that notable?
Because, well, to be fair, I'd actually seen that. All the case studies we'd done, that was the first front door I'd actually seen that had basically broken down during fire.
So it demonstrated there was obviously an extreme heat source of some form immediately behind it versus just smoke damage.
Exactly, yeah. And then actually once you got into the little foyer area, you've got the stairs directly in front of you and a door to your left. And actually in that little compartment there, everything had burnt through, right through the floorboards. And actually there was traces of accelerant there, hence why there was such severe fire damage to the front door.
What was the evidence that suggested there was traces of accelerant there?
So in our brief, it was noted that there was a strong smell of accelerant. The fire investigation dog had actually been in. So with that account, again, we're just trying to piece everything together. And then in I believe it was the kitchen, there were two containers, and obviously because we weren't actually there, we were just using the evidence given. We were told that there were traces of accelerant inside the can that actually matched the pooling evidence the other side of the door.
So without jumping ahead of ourselves, it sounds like someone's just from the ground floor at least doused the front door, but they've not poured it through the letterbox. They've done it from inside the property and then left out the back, or they've backed their way into the kitchen or something like that.
I believe he actually left through the front door.
Wow. Okay.
So I think he'd shut it, put a match through the letterbox, and that's how he'd been able to get out, if that makes sense. Was the individual ever apprehended? As far as I know, yes, he was. Because that's the sort of thing, like you say, you can start matching accelerant with the individual's clothing, and because as much as people think they're careful with stuff, there often is a scent or a splash of some form that gets on their clothing. Certainly their feet, if he'd put them down in the kitchen and then left out the front door, he will have walked immediately back through the path, or she. Sorry. There were a few. There was quite evidence of quite heavy smokers in the house as well, littered with ashtrays or crisp packets that they'd used as ashtrays, cigarette lighters, burns on the clothing, just trying to throw you off, just to make you think, well, actually, could it have gone down, an accidental ignition, etc. Yeah. So you have to. When there's a lot of bad habits going on in there, it's easy to see those things and let your own biases and your own assumptions sort of come in. Now, you mentioned in the hallway, in the stairwell, evidence of a flashover of some form. How do you know there's been a flashover? You could tell by the burn patterns. So there was very little in the way of actual sort of furnishings left in there. And then as you'd gone up, you could see the actual neutral plane where it burnt in. So these were all things that we're trying to take in and just try and build a picture in your mind of what the stage was. So to me, he'd set the fire at the bottom, or a fire had been set at the bottom, not necessarily the individual. Obviously the heat has risen, up the stairs. You can see the burn patterns, and you tend to see the direction of travel as well of all the hot gases. And then as you made it upstairs, there was actually a diagonal line across the wall of one of the bedrooms. So it appeared, as this fire had progressed and started growing, someone had actually opened that door and let all that hot gas in, let the fire in, and you could see that by the diagonal mark up the left wall.
Okay, so there was a fully developed fire outside that, obviously. So the fire started downstairs potentially, it spread up the stairs, but because there's been such a significant marking on the wall, something was already under pressure outside the door, rather than it already being open and it slowly developing. There was a surge of heat and or unburnt products of combustion pushing into that room to cause like a diagonal scarring, if you will, on the wall.
As far as I can remember, there was quite limited fire damage in that room.
Okay.
It was actually initial sort of blast of that hot air that had been opened in, and then if you sort of go round again, the other room had actually gone into flashover, and there was very, very little you could actually identify in that room apart from scorching everywhere.
To talk to us about, we spoke about doors a little bit of time ago, in relation to whether or not they're open or they're closed. Just help people get their minds around how you can identify that.
So I was taught that a room had gone into flashover, let's say. Everything inside had been involved. You could tell if the door was open or not by the hinges. So if the door had actually burnt off, you'd start to see maybe a door handle not underneath the frame. It would be 45 degrees, say, or it looks like the door has been like hinges as well. So are the hinges in the closed position or are they open? Just things like that, that I would never have thought about before.
Because obviously, like I say, if the door's broken down and burnt through, you'll often find the screws, whilst damaged and flashed or whatever, will still be holding it into the frame. And if the rest of the wood is just disintegrated away from it, it'll still be in a closed position. The hinge will still be closed. And like you've said, the handle itself will either be down near the frame, or if it's out at a 45-degree angle, again, that would suggest that. And if the carpet or something is completely burnt through, or if it's predominantly burnt through, you'll see a difference in a burn pattern between where the underside of the door was, and again, it's exposure to heat and flame, versus the carpet that wasn't protected by even that small 2-inch piece of door that was sat above it for X period of time, 30 minutes before it broke down.
Exactly, yeah. And to me, that just blew my mind.
You just walk in there, and most firefighters do the same. They just bimble into a room, don't really think about stuff, and just start trying to pick things up and look underneath stuff, whereas there's so many things you can learn just from standing back and observing the subtle aspects of the room's setup or layout, if you will.
Exactly there, and that you sort of take into consideration that during firefighting operations, things are going to get kicked about, aren't they?
Yeah.
Pitch black, water damage can account for a lot as well, and firefighter going through with the boots could just simply kick that door handle. It could have been directly underneath the frame, but then the hose reels dragged it out of position or something, and then you sort of start to build a different picture that might not actually be that accurate.
So that's where it's super important to be getting the accounts and the sort of witness statements from BA wearers, incident commanders, other individuals that have entered the property.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
I mean, just that subject matter alone is a wealth of knowledge that you take away from that course. You mentioned about Hazmats as well as being one of the parts of the curriculum or a module. I found Hazmats absolutely fascinating. How did you come away from it, and what sort of depth did you go into the fire science aspect of it? So
we mainly looked at the legislation behind Hazmats, because I didn't realise a lot of the hazardous materials are actually firewater runoff. These are considerations that you need to take in if you've got big warehouse going next to a river. A lot of the hazmats could actually be as a result of firefighter actions. So we looked at primary containment, secondary, tertiary, etc.
Yeah.
I looked at Buncefield for my one of my assignments.
Okay.
Because that had such a huge impact on the local area, and I think firefighting as a whole.
For people that are unfamiliar with that incident, it was a big incident. I know there's a few case studies about it, but give us an overview of what that incident involved. So,
if my memory serves me right, it was an oil storage, petrol oil, different storage
facility. That's how I remember it, yeah.
Hertfordshire way. A tanker driver had pulled up in the morning. It was about 6 o'clock in the morning, I think, quite early, quite still, not a lot of wind on, and they began loading oil or petrol into the tanker, and I believe one of the faulty sensors where the tank had started overflowing, the sensor hadn't quite picked it up. We're getting a lot more of the liquid was getting transferred that shouldn't have been. A vapour cloud build up, and I think eventually did a backwater pump kick in or something, which caused a little spark and basically flattened the place, didn't it?
Yeah, so we're getting into sort of upper and lower explosive limits in terms of richness of environments there. When you can get dust clouds, all sorts of fibers, if in the right sort of balance, can cause a really, really explosive environment. And yeah, you're right when you say it affected fire service all over the UK, certainly, because I think that played into some of the equipment and stuff that we use in road traffic collisions that is static versus non-static. So things that have the potential to cause a spark that we are taking into environments that we are not fully familiar with. And this was long before operational personnel had gas detectors on all the appliances where we could readily test the air of an environment. You know, we'd almost have to wait till we were well into the risk area and smelt it ourselves, which is, you know, quite unreliable, really. You know, relying on somebody's smell is very relative to the individual.
Yeah, and I think it tested foam capabilities as well, didn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, the amount of foam and water required, and then where does all that go? All the containment tanks were getting filled instantly, weren't they? So it's how do you contain all that foam and water, and where's it going to go?
Developing that relationship with the Environment Agency, you know, source, pathway, receptor, where is this stuff going? What is the potential effect on other companies or wildlife, other things that are pumping from that water source? And again, predominantly the wildlife. There's a lot of things in the UK that people are unaware of in terms of the effect of chemical incidents, and also just general fire, the amount of carcinogens and various chemicals that come off the substances and fabrics that are in our day-to-day lives can be very, very toxic when they enter a pathway.
Yeah, and especially because I had an interest in the fire service prior to the degree, but until I actually started learning about these things, they're just considerations that never crossed my mind. And I'm sure that's the same for most people, you know, in the public.
Mate, that's the same for most firefighters, to be honest. I think the stuff that you're learning there is sort of an interim incident command level crew manager, crew commander perspective that a lot of people need to then step back and look at incidents from a more holistic standpoint. But it's always incredibly powerful when you've got members of the crew, firefighters, who have either special interest or a wealth of knowledge, such as yourself, who feel confident enough to give those prompts, because there's so much to think about at incidents these days, from equipment to standard operating procedures to the after effects and also the effect of the crew, things that we weren't aware of 20 years ago, from chemicals and radiation and infection and decontamination. And this was before COVID. You know, it's so useful to see that courses such as your bachelor's that you've run on there is an opportunity for people to really upskill themselves rather than coming into the job relatively blind.
Yeah, there's always something to learn. I don't think there'll ever be a point where, you know, you get your competency, but then by the time you've reviewed something, it could have changed again, couldn't it?
Oh, mate, or there's a few fundamentals, but most things go through different iterations, and even across different services there can be slightly different approaches. We're getting to a point now where national operational guidance is fairly adhered to across most services, but it is still lots of flexibility in service isms, if you will, how certain services deal with certain incidents, and also just the resources that some services have and some don't.
Yeah, exactly. I think that goes with culture as well, different cultures of services and the people who are leading, and it can get quite complex, can't it?
Yeah, so part of your studies, you went away and did some additional research, and I remember you saying you had an opportunity to interview Dr. Sabrina Cohen-Hatton, is that right?
Yep, that was correct. That was probably the most nerve-wracking thing I've done in my life, yeah.
That is awesome. She is on the list to have on the podcast. Her book, The Heat of the Moment, was an incredible read. She narrates it herself as an audible version, and I found it fantastic. How did that situation come about?
We were looking at operational leadership and command, one of the modules. So all about sort of motivational theories, leadership theories, incident command theories. And I've previously watched the video on human factors, making decisions in the fire service. And I was just scrolling through Twitter and I saw she came up. So I thought, well, I might just message her, you know. Shy kids don't get sweets, do they?
That's it, baby. You know it.
I just thought, I'll just drop her a message and just say, hi, Dr. Cohen-Hatton, I'm studying for this. Do you mind if I just asked you a few questions? And within about 10 minutes, she'd reply. She said, yep, Ben, I'll send you a message now. And within about a week, I was having a phone call with her. So it was great. It was really, really insightful.
I need to use Twitter. I don't use Twitter. That's my problem.
Well, I've set up my own Twitter just for following fire services.
Yeah.
Following the EA, fire services, police, ambulance, just to see what's going on, try and see what's going on around the country and if there's any talks coming up, or, I think it's a great platform.
So 2 questions off the back of that. Number one, what were some of the most interesting studies that you looked at in terms of leadership in the fire service? Because we could talk for hours about this. The Institute of Fire Engineers do a good job of summarising a lot of the leadership styles and stuff in the exams that they ask people to take. But what were some of the things that surprised you, or did it spur on any self-reflection or spark any personal development in you to think about the way that you lead in your day-to-day life?
Yeah, definitely. Our lecturer got us to do the 16 personalities.
Yeah.
Have you done that one? That's quite long, actually. It takes about 5-10 minutes to do. But
yeah, the 16 personalities is a good one. There's the Myers-Briggs, there's the Belbin, there's several leadership tools that I would certainly encourage people to take a look at. It's a really healthy exercise to do. There's also a strength builder program that helps leaders identify where they naturally lean towards different aspects. But you went for the 16 styles. Yeah,
so I can't remember what I actually was, but I was the same as Barack Obama. That's what I can remember.
That's not a bad place to be.
Yeah, so something I'd never considered. You just think firefighters rock up, do the job and go home. But then you start thinking about psychology, decision making under stress, and the different leadership types, and then it becomes a rich tapestry. I think can be explored for years to come. Incredibly
rich. So what sort of stuff did you speak to Sabrina about, and how did that conversation go?
So I focused mainly on Tame and wicked problems. So Grint, if you're not aware of Tame and wicked problems, Tame problems can basically be removed from a situation, solved and returned. So it's like a scientific theory. So is it Taylor scientific management theory?
I'm not familiar with that one.
So I think Taylor looked at a shovel, and he basically said, I'm going to provide my workers with a long handle and a short actual shovel, and then I'm going to lengthen the length of the shovel, shorten the handle, and I'm going to see how long it takes them to dig a hole. And he basically came up with the perfect length shovel, and then that's managing people. So you give them the right tools, the right task, whereas a wicked problem is something that can't actually be removed from its environment, solved and returned. So I liken it to Sudoku. Mm-hmm. You can do a Sudoku. It's sort of scientific, it's mathematical, but then you look at something like the NHS, you can't actually take everyone's health problems, take it away, learn how to solve it and put them back in. There's no cure.
You can't hit pause on it on something like that.
No. And you tend to find that it's socioeconomic problems that lead to health problems, etc. And, I don't think everything is ever going to be solved in that way. So then I liken that to the fire service. So each year the fire service, the climate's changing, both in terms of actual climate change. We're looking at flooding, heath fires, but actually the climate, the political climate, the socio-economic climate's always changing. And that's where you need a leader for these wicked problems. You don't need someone to come in and say, you need to do this, this, this and this. It's scientific in nature. You're getting managed. You actually need a leader to ask the right questions. And that's something that Dr. Conaton gave me a great insight for.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Management is more specifically, it's more of a non-emotional approach. The dictatorial aspect that you described there of tell, is very much resource, time, all of these inhuman aspects, which I think a lot of people associate with managing. I manage fire trucks, I manage personnel, and even the term human resources. Do you know what I mean? That's such a cold term if you actually think about it. Human, no, they're not resources. These are people. These are people with feelings and thoughts and different backgrounds, and you reference the phrase of a rich tapestry. That is what makes the fire service what it is, and in the past decade I feel we've moved a long way away from that. In certain services over the last maybe 2 or 3 years, you've seen them start trying to turn the Titanic and approach the aspect of leadership more directly. And they've had to do that by approaching external companies. And I know Sabrina's done a lot of external coaching, and she's the sort of person that will go outside of the box to try and find a solution. Whereas we've had a lot of managers that are now in higher level positions trying to manage. And I think reflection, as you referenced there, to develop true leadership skills, it needs a lot of humility. You need to be willing to unpick your own biases, your own behaviors, your own mannerisms, and be willing to not change yourself, but even if you just come from a place of understanding, and then it's a good place to start, to begin to look at adaptation and knowing your audience and the people that you're asked to lead. When people reference themselves as a leader, I find it's really hard to explain to them that you can't call yourself a leader. It's a bit like calling yourself funny. You can't go, I'm really funny. Only someone else can say if you're funny or not. Leadership is a term that is given to you. It's something that is said by others. They say, Ben is a great leader. You can't say I'm a leader. The self-proclaimed senior leadership team is just laughable. I'm not saying the individuals in any service are laughable, although some are. It's their perception of a title, self-proclaimed, that gives them position that they think, and predominantly a lot of them manage, and they really do manage, which is sad.
I think it's always going to be under review. You could start getting on top of something, and then you think, well, actually, we need to go back and do it a different way. Which, I find it dead interesting. I think it's going to keep me busy for years to come, hopefully. So
it should do, mate. I think, personal development and leadership as an overarching theme for life, because people go, I'm not really interested in doing a management position or a leadership position, whatever word they want to use. I always say to people, look, if you're a parent, you're a leader. If you've got a friend, then you have the potential to be a leader in somebody's eyes. But even before you try and lead anybody else, you must first be able to lead yourself. And that involves understanding your own behaviors, your own biases, and knowing what drives you. How are you motivated? What's your reward mechanism? How do you come across? How do you convey yourself? How do you articulate yourself? What is the impact? What is the intended impact versus the actual impact of your communication, of your style of working in and around other people? So many people, I believe, are fantastic individual contributors, but they fall short of embodying and imbuing somebody else with their own motivations and drivers, because they tell rather than sell. And ultimately, you do need to be a great salesperson. Life is sales. When you're speaking on a podcast, you're selling somebody on a subject you find very interesting. If you're speaking to a child, you're trying to sell them on a principle or a value. Sales gets a really bad rap, but if you're trying to encourage somebody to adopt a value or a principle, even in the fire service, you have to sell them on the validity of it. And that can be difficult for people that think you should just do something because I've told you to do it. And that's a very, very slippery slope.
Yeah, and especially communication is everything. It's absolutely key. You may have a message in your head, but when you try and actually get that out, it could come across totally different. It could come across as arrogant, or someone who might just look at you and think, you haven't got a clue.
Yeah.
And there's often a denotative and connotative meaning to everything. And if someone's got the wrong end of the stick, you can be uphill battle, can't it? It can be absolutely terrible.
This is why I encourage people to read books, to listen to books, to watch shows that expand their vocabulary. Because if you're limited by how you can describe something, then you're going to be limited to the number of people who can understand it. And otherwise, only people with a very similar upbringing from a very similar socioeconomic level are going to be able to understand what you're trying to say, because you don't have another way to say it. Your words have the power to move people. And that, for me, is what then becomes leadership, knowing that there's always a different way to say it and a different way to say it. When you've told somebody something, or when you've explained it, and even the phrase that when people say, Ben started describing it and a light came on in my head. That metaphorical, you started to explain something and it became visible to me as you articulated out and padded out the vision. That's what truly inspires people. If you can describe a vision, and that's how I personally feel inspired. Nobody ever gets inspired by a plan. Nelson Mandela didn't come out and say, I've got a 12-point plan. He didn't. He said, I've got a dream. I've got a vision. And he explained the vision so that people could gravitate towards it. They could see a from and to. It wasn't just that dictatorial, this is the plan, steps 1, 2, 3. And that's not a lot of human aspects in that.
I mean, at my A-levels, I was doing A-level English language, and we looked at Donald Trump speeches. Now, personally, I'm not for him at all. But the way he spoke, he would every sort of sentence, the intonation was brilliant. Yeah. Certain words would get sort of just mumbled, whereas other words, the intonation on them, and he'd always end on action. He'd always end on either, if he was trying to persuade someone to look at this thing, he'd end on a positive or he'd end on a negative, which made them think, oh, actually, he is right. I don't want to be doing this. It
Absolutely.
might have been,
how do I provoke the emotion? And then if I provoke an emotion and get them to say yes, even mentally, they subconsciously agree to the entire thing that I've said. There's not necessarily meaning they're going to sign on to something, but they start to move in that general direction because of where you've placed the intention, where you've placed the focus of that sentence. And you're absolutely right. And I'm not going to necessarily compare Donald Trump to Hitler, but Hitler was a wonderful orator. He was fantastic. If you see some of his old speeches translated, he was incredible. He could command a crowd, and he could articulate with such passion. He was a truly great man. He did a horrific thing, a very, very horrific thing, and I certainly don't condone what he did. And he was an incredibly poisonous, destructive individual. But he was a great speaker.
Yeah, and you only have to look at what happened at Capitol Hill during January and all the backlash from the elections. That he did have a massive following, and whether it's his policies or what, that's politics. That's nothing for me. But the way in which he moved a crowd and moved his following, you've got to take note, haven't you?
Oh, you have, yeah. I mean, we can close that loop on a good note as well, because your 16-point comparison, Barack Obama was also a wonderful orator, fantastic, really incredible speaker.
Exactly, yeah.
So we've got hazmat, we've got fire investigation, we've got leadership skills. What were some of the other big ones? I'm not going to ask you to go through the whole curriculum, but what was something else that really stood out in your mind?
I've just finished fire safety in the built environment, so we're looking at approved document.
Complex. That is complex.
It is. Regulatory reform, fire safety order, and then I was looking at hospitals. So I live down the road from Royal Stoke, big trauma centre for the Midlands and beyond, and one of our assignments was basically a new hospital is going to get built. What needs to go into it? Not sort of specific in details, but you have to go through the whole process, audits. And, once you start getting into, you've got the regulatory reform order for buildings that are already in use, and you look at approved document B for your new builds. But then there's also many health technical memorandums again, which is government's sort of fire safety process for hospitals. And once you get going into that, it can be an absolute nightmare, but it's there's so much to go at, and
there is so much, not even just the basics of travel distances and places of relative safety versus places of complete safety, and then all of the different aspects that go into it. It's a minefield. I've only briefly looked into it with my IFE exams and stuff like that, and I'll be honest, I didn't warm to the subject.
No, I mean, I was quite excited about it, and then once I started getting into it, I was like, oh, legislation. But actually, once you look past the legislation, you start to think, wow, well, I know that when I stepped through, when I've been in the hospital before, that's been there, and I think, oh, I know why now. You see it in the real world, which helped me, definitely.
I think there's some work to be done in closing the gap between how much, I'm going to use the word pain, how much pain you have to go through to get to that point of realization. Because I'll be honest, I'm not 100% there yet, but I think we've spoken about communication several times. It's because I've not necessarily had, or I've not placed myself in a position, where a lecturer or somebody, the wealth of knowledge in the subject matter has been able to bring the material to life, which I certainly think is helpful for some of the documents you referenced there, which can be some very heavy reading.
Yeah, they can be. And you can be reading pages and pages and pages just for one sentence. Yeah. One sentence out of your 3,000 word essay, one sentence, and it's taking you, half an hour just to find that little golden nugget.
Are you familiar with the search function on PDFs?
Yes, I am. Yes.
That was a godsend. When I started doing some of my studies, I was like, oh God, I can't do it. I can't scroll through. I'm just, I'm a persistent guy, but but when I found that, I was like, thank God, that was a lifesaver for me.
Even then, you could have another 30 or 40 results to
and also, if you just get the terms slightly wrong, because some of the complexities around some of the uncommon terminology that's used threw me out as well, to be honest.
Yeah, compartment.
Yes.
And you click.
What you would think common sense to say about a building or a room, is just getting the terminology, getting your head around it. But it's great to see that people like you are coming in knowing that. In my service, we have just started encouraging our crew commanders or crew managers, to take on the fire safety aspect as a formal qualification, just to empower them with a greater understanding and a greater lens through which to look at risk inspections and things like that, because we simply don't have the people power, the resources to get out there and visit all of these businesses and homes and hospitals. There's that many care homes, new businesses popping up all over the place. Everyone's got that entrepreneurial itch, myself included, but it puts a big weight on the emergency services from a risk perspective and a fire safety perspective.
Yeah, and what I found was you could be looking at this and then it mentions a local resilience forum, and then you go, oh, I've done that in emergency planning. It mentions, familiarisation with your 7-2Ds, where your fire goes in, and everything connects, which definitely helps my learning. And you just think, well, this is in there because we have a statutory duty under Article 7-2D to go risk familiarisation, etc. And then that is conveyed onto a local resilience forum, maybe it's placed on the community risk register. So everything's interrelated, and
you start to see where the connections happen and how it's tethered to all of the other. You start believing it wasn't thrown together; it was actually put together at some point in time. Some of the links need readdressing, and some things don't quite match sometimes. But overall, it obviously works because we're keeping people safe every day. I think the breadth of knowledge that you have is going to be one of two things. It's going to be a gift to the crew or the watch that you eventually grace as part of Staffordshire, or if you get somebody that's begrudging and a little bit have an older mindset, don't necessarily mean to be older in themselves, but an older mindset, they may feel a bit threatened and a little bit stressed about the level of depth of knowledge. Do you know where you're going to be stationed? Have you met your watch yet?
No. So my recruitment course will be first quarter next year. So I think all that gets decided once I've got part way through or towards the end of the course. Yeah. So still a bit of a wait yet.
So take us back to where we first started. How did this final application process and recruitment process go for you? What's been different over the 5 or 6 times you've looked and gone through application?
First time I applied, like I said, I was at school, doing my A-levels. So I thought, this will be great. Straight out of school, straight into a job, sorted. But obviously I was well underprepared and I had no life experience. At the time I thought, I'm quite mature, I can do this. But I think until I went to uni and realised that my clothes aren't getting folded, there's no food in the fridge. Like, what's going on here? I think one of the first nights I was at uni, we'd nipped up to Asda, got a pizza, nice and simple, stuck it in the oven, no more than 10 minutes. And 5 minutes in, I was like, what? That doesn't smell like steak and cheese. And I'd actually left the cardboard underside in the pizza.
Oh, mate! Wow, that's the one way to learn. We have some big universities near my station, and it's not completely foreign to have people do things like that in their first year.
And then all your flatmates are like, Ben, what course are you on? I'm like, fire and rescue.
Don't want to talk about it. Don't want to talk about it.
So I applied twice before I actually went to uni, and was unsuccessful on both times. So I sort of put it off for a bit, and then I thought, go to uni, keep your head down, just focus on, getting a bit of life experience. What's it like to live away from home? Yeah. What's it like to do your weekly shop? All these things that, I'm dead grateful that I got that opportunity now, because there is no way I could have gone through that if I wasn't doing the course that I'm on.
And it sounds silly as well, mate, but a lot of people when they come on watch, not a lot, but I've experienced more so in the last 5 years, you get a lot of new recruits coming in and they don't have some basic life skills. They're like how to use basic tools or how to cook for themselves or just weird things that, again, we talk about nature, nurture. These aren't things that you're taught at, fire service college, or these aren't things that come up in a recruit's basic training. But I don't think we're at a point anymore where we can rely on cultural expectations of things people should be familiar with by the time they come into quote unquote adulthood and they go into full-time work. It's not necessarily the same anymore. We need to look much wider and be much more open-minded about how we perceive people's level of independence is going to be when they come into full-time work.
I mean, don't get me wrong. If you'd have asked me when I was 18, you think you're prepared, I would have said, yeah, fine. I've worked in pubs since I was about 15.
Yeah.
So I've got to know people in that sense. You know, I'd had a job, I'd had responsibility, I had to manage my time, dealing with drunks, dealing with fights. You know, it's all a great laugh, isn't it? But no, I wasn't there at all. I was not looking forward. I was just looking at let me get in the fire service, I'll be fine. But actually, there's a lot that needed to happen in between.
So the final time that you went for it, what was involved in the process?
So it was February last year, actually. It popped up on my Snapchat memories the day I applied. So first stage was just the online application. I got sent the online assessments a few days later, passed them. So that was, I believe, maths, verbal reasoning, and situational awareness. So
how difficult was the maths? Because some people get scared about that.
It was harder than I expected.
Okay. What sort of things was involved? Was it areas and volumes and stuff like that? The different, having to remember, pi r squared for certain things, and what was the sphere? Four thirds pi r cubed or something like that. Was it? Is that a sphere? I can't remember. I think that's it. Anyway, we digress. What sort of stuff did you need to do?
Luckily, not spheres, because I wouldn't have had a clue.
Yeah, it's a difficult one. I'm pretty sure that is it. I think it's 4/3 pi r cubed. But anyway, it's irrelevant. But somebody might.
I'll take it. So I think one of the first questions, there was like a big pallet and there were different weights on there. It was asking the pressure. So it was like the pressure for this is 0.8 times 10. The weight is this. And I was like, oh my God, it threw me to be fair. But then you just start to realise, well, the one that's 0.8 times 10 is going to be a lot smaller than the one that's 1.2 times 10.
Yeah.
So I was trying to look around the actual maths. So when they were asking for the heaviest, I'd automatically disregard the smaller two, and that would just save a couple of seconds, and then it would go on. There was a company production, looking at fire extinguishers, 4 different sites, 4 different products, who's made the most here, who's made the less, who's made the most money, who's made the most profit, and it was all about just looking what they were actually asking. Looking what the key
pulling
information
out key
is.
data, both like I said from a mathematical standpoint, but also when you're in the English side of it or the information gathering side of the testing, it is similar to me where you read an article or you read down a message log and they ask you, what time did the first breathing apparatus team go into the job, and you have to find that piece of information. It's similar with that. You're trying to cut through the noise and find the specific piece of data that you need, which for me it's an overarching approach of what the instant ground is like. Do you know what I mean? You can quickly get drawn into all of the noise and all of the panic and the people screaming at you and the societal expectation of what you should and shouldn't be doing, but can you cut through the noise and weigh up the potential risk to benefit and take the appropriate action versus bomb bursting everywhere to try and fix every problem and serve everybody and ultimately serve nobody. And
especially when there's that little clock in the corner ticking down, that's when you start sweating and you start.
I'd make that really big. I'd make it bigger.
Would you?
Yeah, would you? Just to add that pressure. Yeah, you got it. I think you'll see this when you start your training. And I'd be interested to speak to you next year when you're going through your stuff. I know we spoke about talking along your basic training, which would be great if we could make that happen, trying to simulate stress in a training environment is crucial. It's essential in my opinion, and that was what it was like when I first went in, but that was 13 years ago. Now, from my own interactions and observations of new recruits being taught basic level modules, is through fear of bullying, through fear of intimidation. Stress doesn't always have a direct correlation with mental health, in my personal opinion. And also, thinking you can operate as an operational emergency services responder and avoid all types of stress is not realistic, because you can't control all the controllables. You've got to interact with an unknown, which is often a member of the public, and you've got to respond to a 999 call, and you don't know what that is. So you're going to come into contact with a lot of stress, a lot of trauma. We need to teach people management techniques, not management, again, in the whole management leadership talk, but how can you manage stress? How can you manage trauma? What are your coping mechanisms? What do you focus on? What's your approach? That's what we should be doing. But at times, all I've seen is the removal of stress, and that doesn't help people's development in the same way, I don't personally feel. So I'd love to hear what that's like when you go through your basic training. It will be interesting to see. So did you do a mechanical reasoning test?
No, there wasn't. No, not for staffs.
No, sometimes you see them included, as in, if we turn these 3 cogs, what will happen to the lever, or what will happen to the lady sitting on the step if we move this lever? Yeah, which way will they move? And I think that's important. I know a lot of the equipment has gone very electronic these days, and our pumps and primers and everything's mechanical with some sort of internal PCU or something like that. But having a base level mechanical understanding of hydraulics, of pumping, of how ladders from lifts and stuff like that work is really important. But so you did the mathematical and you did the English.
Yep. And then luckily enough, I passed them. So this was all around the time where COVID was starting to creep across as well. So yeah, I got sent home the day after St. Patrick's Day, the 19th of March.
Yeah.
That's about right. So we got sent home from uni. They basically said, uni's shutting, go and work from home. So I think a couple of days before I'd been notified I passed the online test. So I was just waiting my JRTs. They said, with
JRTs, going, for anybody unfamiliar, job-related tests?
Job-related tests, yeah, sorry, mate. So, yeah, they said, we'll get back to you later in the week. And they basically just said, with everything that's going on, going into a full-on lockdown, we're just going to delay them. But don't worry, we haven't cancelled recruitment or anything. And then I think it was around April time, they got back to me and said it's going to be in August, all being well. So for me, that was
still
nice,
a long time, though, to wait, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think it was good, really, because I got all that time in to watch the videos, try and know exactly what I was meant to be doing.
Yeah.
Just get my fitness up, really. So,
did you have any contact with any other recruits that were going through it at that time, and did everybody deal with it as well as you did?
Yeah, so one of my mates on the course, he was on the same actual JRT day as me. We booked it together. He lives in the West Midlands, so it's a bit out for him. But he was just doing the same, really, because we had so much uni work on, because we were missing pretty much a whole semester, really, with being sent home. So I was busy in that respect, keeping that going, but also keeping in the back of my mind, August time, I think it creeps up, doesn't it? Especially when the world stops.
Yeah.
It will creep up. So I was just running, doing a bit of running at night. We had some lovely weather, didn't we, as well?
Oh, man, it was stunning. During the lockdown, there was some really, really beautiful weather.
Yeah, dead lucky, weren't we? So that's what I do. I'd go about 7, half 7 at night, not when it's too hot. Just keep my fitness up that way, really.
So for somebody that's successfully passed the job-related tests now, you've obviously referenced running and stuff like that. Have you always been quite a fit guy, or what advice would you give to somebody that was preparing for the JRTs?
Yeah, I've always played rugby since I was about 6 or 7. Rugby's always been there. But I broke my leg quite badly when I was 16, so I stopped playing rugby. And then just going to the gym, really, just trying to keep my fitness up. And I think for the JRTs in particular, I think my cardiovascular fitness was what I really sort of used.
Okay.
Strength-wise, it's that important, but for me, it was definitely just controlling my breathing. That was the main aspect. Even on the ladder climb, it's not that strenuous, is it? But keep breathing, deep breaths, staying calm, doing as you're told. Even the equipment assembly as well. I can control my breathing, start thinking a bit clearer, watching what I'm. That was important.
I don't necessarily think there's too many techniques as such you can practice for dexterity, but something I always used to do, and I remember it was a long time ago now, and people might laugh at this, but like the torches that just a flashlight that some people keep under the stairs.
Yeah.
I would literally just take that to pieces and put it on the table. Take it out, take the cylinder outside, take the 2 batteries out, take the bulb out, put them all on the table, and then I would assemble the torch and then, time myself doing it, because I think it was roughly the same from the videos I saw. There was about 8 or 9 components, and I'd just do that again and again and again, and then I'd blindfold myself doing it, and then I'd ask my partner to put them in different positions, and I'd have to feel where they were on the table, and then assemble them, and just trying to make it harder and harder and harder. I think that was a really useful one, and for anybody that hasn't got a flashlight, I'm sure you can think of something relatively similar. Just a component in the house that's relatively cheap and has got a few components to it. I found that really, really useful. Did you do the equipment carry? And if so, what sort of weights were you having to move and shift, or what pieces of equipment did you have to do?
So started out dragging off a length of hose off the hose reel.
So
that's
sticking
not too
that
bad.
over your shoulder, and were you allowed to run with that?
Yep, run, brisk jog.
Okay, so you've got that over your shoulder or under your arm, and you just lean into it. And is it 20 meters, or how far do you have to go?
Yep, 20 metre shuttle.
20
so
metres,
there's just a bit of resistance to that. Run back, and then there were 2 lengths of hose tied up. I think that was walk there and back 4 times.
One
So
in
80
each hand.
So, yeah, there's a nice loop that you can sort of grab onto as well, so you're not struggling with the
Sticking
hose.
your fingers in the hose, yeah.
Yeah, no, so that was all right. Then drop one of them, pick one of the hose reels up.
Drop them?
So it's in place.
Or put them down. That's always something. Don't drop the hose. Something we always used to get shouted at.
Yeah, can't chip them, can you?
Yeah.
No. And then just make sure, I think that was just 2 lengths walking.
Okay.
Most of the carrying, you have to walk as well.
Yeah, in case you fall flat on your face and smash your teeth in, basically. But were you not allowed to run when you didn't have anything in your hands?
Yep, you could run when as long as you weren't carrying any equipment. Yeah, that was fine.
Yeah.
But it's just finding that little bit that's not walking, it's not jogging.
Yeah.
You're just pushing as far as you can.
So very, very brisk march, very big pace. It's almost like every third step you would go into a skip sort of thing.
Yeah, exactly, mate. Yeah, that's it.
You did all of this in full fire kit as well, right?
Yeah, it was. Yeah,
Or the big baggy loaner kit. How did you get on with the big wellies?
not bad. No, not bad. I'd worn wellies. My granddad had a farm, so I've been in wellies before. Yeah, that wasn't too bad.
Did you have to pick up a barbell and do some walking with that as well, or did they have something else?
Yeah, that was the last bit. That was, I think, walked 4 lengths again with that. So I just went for 1 hand underneath, 1 hand on top. That was just comfiest. I'd practiced at the gym.
Yeah, I think that's the best way to do it. Anybody that's ever done a deadlift, they'll know that as an opposing grip. The double overhand, if you've not got a fantastic grip, it can feel like it's slipping. Yeah,
exactly. And it was quite a damp day. It was raining when I did it as well, so I didn't want to drop it at all. So
did you have to wear gloves?
For me, yeah, full fire gloves, yeah.
Yeah, because they can be a bit slippy and a bit cumbersome. Because obviously you're borrowing all the kit at the end of the day, so it's they're not going to fit perfect.
No, and going back to the equipment assembly as well, I could do the equipment assembly quite easily with my hands, but then as soon as you put gloves on, totally different ball game.
Absolutely.
You've got hardly any feeling at all. You can't grip. It's all slippy. It's that kind of stress, can't it?
Did you have to do the overhead press with the ladder lift?
Yeah, did that as well. That wasn't too bad.
How heavy was that?
I think, is it 30 kilos?
I don't think it's 30 because manual handling regulations are 25 up to waist
25.
height. So I feel like it's 25. But the overhead bit where you press it past the line, it might even be a bit lighter than that, to be honest with you. I can't remember. I really should know. But it's a long time since I've helped out on one of the recruitment days. But yeah, it's certainly not. I think if people can practice with a 25 kilo lift, and again, that's a sort of pivot and fulcrum analogy. It's not a straight overhead lift. You're lifting a pole, aren't you, effectively, with a weight descended beneath it and taking it, not necessarily overhead height, but you have to reach a height, so it's not like locking your arms out or whatever. Did you have to get to a certain line? Yeah,
so depending on your height, depends on how high you're going to actually have to extend. For me, I wasn't fully extended, but I wasn't too close to my head. It was like halfway.
Yeah.
It wasn't too bad.
Without confusing people too much, did you have to do a static, like military press, or were you allowed to bend your knees?
You could bend your knees.
You were allowed to bend your knees. You know what? I've been on some of them where they're like, your knees must remain locked out throughout the entire lift. You must press the whole thing with your shoulders. I was like, that's bad manual handling. That is just stupid. You want to cushion it with your knees. That's just common sense. But you get some people doing these that have never done any form of I'm not saying you need to be a bloody competitive weightlifter, but they don't understand the biomechanics of lifting something up, and it's dangerous. If you're ever on a recruitment and they tell you to lock your knees out, I mean, I wouldn't suggest that you confront them there and then and tell them that they're wrong, but definitely ask a question when you get 5 minutes later, because you shouldn't be getting told to lock your knees out.
And you do get a practice run, or I did at least, with just the bar, no weight on top.
Yeah. I did it, and they go up with increments. I think they put a 10 kilo weight on first, and then you did a 15, and then go up to the working weight.
Oh, right, okay. Yeah, so for me, it was just the test with just a bar, which, it's quite cumbersome. You need to get the grip right, you just need to get it in the right place, up and down, weight on, up and down. So it took seconds, really, not too bad.
Awesome. So that's, did you have to do the rat run as well?
Yeah, that was probably the most
confined
stressful.
space test, sorry.
Yeah, because they could actually shut the doors and change the path.
Ah, good. I'm glad, because you go to some of them and they're a bit lazy. They just have one course.
No, pitch black, helmet on, visor down.
Good. Did you have an obscuration mask on?
No, it was pitch black in there.
Okay.
It was in the training tower, so the instructor in there had a thermal imaging camera. But I couldn't see the visor in front of me. Couldn't see anything at all, which again adds a bit of stress, doesn't it, and keeps you on your toes.
I love it. I absolutely love it. I went thundering through there. I think I broke one of the cages when I did it. I was 23 stone at the time. So I was This is when people say that, oh God, I'm not sure I'm going to fit in there. I was like, I was massive when I did it. I was embarrassingly large. So, don't worry about it. It's not, size isn't going to be a problem. If you can get in there, you can get through it and you can get out the other end. It's more about your mindset and allowing yourself to stay calm as you're getting through there. Because you will feel at a time that you get stuck. You'll feel like you get stuck somewhere. You're not stuck. You can back your way out and find another way. There's always another way to go through.
You're feeling around, you feel down, you feel up, and also instead of smacking against the cage, your hand just pops through, and you just think, there we go.
There it is. Did you have to go down at any point? Did you have to change levels?
Yeah, quite a few times. Feet forward, down.
Yeah. That's the bit that always worries me, because when people do panic, they go a bit fast and they can stack it and nearly go face first down the hole. That's why obviously you've got an instructor in there with you who will shout very, very loud. And I've been that person at one point in time, having to shout very loud and reach out to stop someone going face first down because they think they're going to run out of time. Yeah.
So always just take your time. That was what I found. Take your time without being too slow.
Yeah.
Sooner or later, a space will pop up.
Yeah. I always tell people slow is smooth, smooth is fast. Do you know what I mean? Be slow and methodical. If you try and rush, you'll make mistakes and you'll probably hurt yourself. You hurt your hands on the cages, you keep bashing into things. And whilst you've got a helmet on, you can still jar your neck if you're not careful. And also, it just doesn't demonstrate a great deal of control from the assessor's perspective. There's no need to rush. More speed, less haste, sort of thing.
Yeah, and I was surprised how hot I got in there as well.
Yeah.
Obviously, with the fire kit on, it was like evening time, so it wasn't too warm. But once I got in there, because you're breathing against the visor as well, aren't you? So all that heat's getting
do start cooking pretty fast.
Yeah. You don't realise until you're actually in there, do you? What it's like.
So you passed all of the JRTs, which is incredible. How long did you have to wait for your interviews?
It was only a couple of weeks.
Okay, and what sort of preparation and what guidance did they give you for it? Did you have like a couple of sheets of what questions you were going to be asked, or how did you structure your answers?
I had all the PQAs and the stars saved. Like my lecturers advised me, look at possible interview questions. So just try and.
I know we're terrible for this. Just back up on the acronyms for us there. We've got PQAs, so personal qualities and attributes, and a STAR mechanism for people that's unfamiliar. What does that mean?
Correct me if I'm wrong, but is it situation, task, action, and reflection?
Oh, yeah, results or reflection. I think it's good to have 2 R's, to be honest with you. So, yeah, situation, what was happening, task, what needed to be done, action, what did you do, what did you specifically do, as a result of your action, what was the result, and then reflection. If you'd have done it again, what would you do differently, or what did you take away from it, what did you learn from it? Yeah,
so all our lecturers had said, you might not be looking to apply whilst you're doing the degree, but it's good to actually start getting a little list of little anecdotes you can actually use. Where have you been displaying teamwork? Where have you been championing diversity, etc., like that? So I'd built up a little portfolio really, just in the event that I did have an interview.
And what sort of examples were you putting in this portfolio?
So anything rugby-wise, working under stress. Okay. I started coaching rugby as well. So I coach under 11s.
That's stressful.
So, yeah, it is. It's great though. It's rewarding, but at the same time, they can be pests. It can be mayhem.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you get into the sort of not necessarily just leadership, but communicating, developing others, working as part of a team, managing setbacks if your team lost a game or if you applied for another job and you didn't get it, handling that setback and what were your reflections and what did you do about it? How did you learn better for the next time?
Yeah, and just trying to keep the kids safe during COVID as well.
Yeah, crikey. I bet that gave you loads of examples, to be fair.
Yeah, some kids were, really good. They'd get used to it at home, they get used to it at school, but then other kids, they they might just forget, or they just might not want to. So it's about learning who needs shouting at, but who needs just a word of encouragement. You know, some kids will respond quite heavily to if you're, you know, shouting not at them as such, because it's sport. You know, you're shouting to them. Some kids will be like, "Oh, right, yeah, I better step in line."
Yeah.
Other kids will do the absolute opposite if you start shouting.
Oh, some people will recoil. Again, just nature nurture. You don't know what their home life situation is and how they respond to that sort of encouragement as you might think you're doing, but actually to them it may just come across threatening.
Yeah, so that was dead important, and I could use sort of experiences where one lad needs a bit of an arm around them and says, "Well, no, you know, you might have had a bad day, but it's all right." Whereas another lad might need a, "Come on, that's not you."
That's not you. Yeah, you're better than that. And
you just learn, don't you? You learn what people are like, and it's trial and error most of the time. Most of the time, you will do the wrong thing. It'll go badly, and then
that's the only way we learn, baby.
That's it.
So when you had your interview process, how intimidating was that? How many people did you have in the room? Did you do a group session, or was it all one-to-one, or what was it like?
Yeah, so it was split up. I think there was about 9, 10, 11 people there for the afternoon session. And then for about half an hour, we were split into 2 groups. I was in a group of, I think there was 5, including me. And that was your group discussion. So we were in this big, nice conference room, all sat around the table, senior officers in all corners watching you. HR were there, and there was little leaflets of paper in the middle of the table, and they basically said, someone goes up, gets a question, discuss. And you know, it's not about how many things you discuss, it's not about if you actually come to a result, it's just we want to see how you interact. So
I've not seen that taking place yet. I've heard a few new recruits reference that. I've not actually seen that practice done. I think it'd be awesome. I think it's a really healthy way to do it, to balance people's ability to deal with confrontation, deal with setbacks, their ability to explain something, how confident and their conviction in their own opinion or something like that, but also their willingness and acceptance to listen to and understand other people and maybe ask open questions about someone else's opinion as well.
Yeah, and I was going in expecting, there'll be questions on fire safety, you know, how would you act if you was a firefighter in a school, etc. But we were in a group of, it was all blokes, I think 5, like I said, 5 of us, and one of the lads went up, got the first question off the desk, and so I was thinking, you know, fire safety. Do you know what the question was?
Hit me.
Do girls gossip more than boys?
Love it. It's a great talking point.
Like curveball, that's what do I say now? It took me by surprise totally.
I love it. Well, how did that conversation go? Did everyone feel a bit stumped, or what sort of things came out in the conversations?
A lot of it was but a lot of it was also, you know, I love a good wine and a bitch down the pub, you know. So you know, you could, as we do, don't we? We tend to.
Oh yeah, blokes are just as bad.
But especially having an all male crew, that was. I was careful not to, you know, jump on that testosterone bandwagon.
Because it can be very easy to be influenced by the people around you and start, like you say, spiraling into certain language, certain ways you speak about it. Yeah,
a sarcastic comment from me could come across as one of the assessors taking it very seriously, couldn't?
Absolutely. You know, what sort of language are you using? What sort of derogatory references are you perhaps making? Even though somebody's not in the room, you've always got to be conscious of the impact that your words are having on other people. Yeah.
And again, something like, should pineapple be on pizza? That was one of the other questions.
Yes, it should. Move on. Next.
Oh, dear.
Where do you sit in the pineapple camp?
No, not a chance, mate.
What?
No.
Me? No. Come on. Variety's the spice of life, Ben. Come on, where's your inclusivity? Where's your openness?
Draw the line there, mate. No, pineapple should not.
You didn't even give me an opportunity to justify why. I feel hurt. And offended. All right, pineapple's important as well. All right, pineapple lives matter. I'm not joking. No, but even things such as that, the context is fairly irrelevant. It's about how you navigate around it, and even something as silly as that. I mean, we say it's silly. Some subjects to some people are very silly, but to others they may be incredibly impactful. You know, something that has affected their life. I'm going to be naive now and maybe punt into the universe that pineapple has probably not had a significant impact on most people's lives unless they had a close family member that died as a result of a pineapple incident. But a lot of other subjects, whilst they may be benign to some people around words, sexuality, things like this, backgrounds, can be very, very significant to other people. And like you say, you've got to control yourself and not treat something relatively irrelevant to you just because you've not had an experience that it's impacted you, because maybe you don't know any transgender people, you've never been bullied, you've never experienced not having the same rights as other people.
Yeah, and I think you've got to actually listen to what someone says and not just sit there quietly, just nodding.
Yeah.
Ask a question, oh, right, well, what do you think if this? Or, well, I don't agree with you, or would you agree on this as a compromise? It's active listening.
Active listening, paraphrasing and bouncing it back rather than just waiting for your turn to speak.
Yeah, and limiting how much you actually speak. Do I take control of the group, or do I sit back and hope someone else controls the group?
I'm terrible at that, as is probably evident with the podcast. My enthusiasm tends to come out in long, overly analytical speeches, if you will, because I get so passionate about certain subjects. But it's something I'm working on. Do you know what I mean? Trying not to be too enthusiastic, because that can suffocate some people. Yeah,
sometimes I could talk for hours about a certain subject, and then other times I wouldn't have a clue what to say.
Yeah.
I haven't got a clue. I'm not well informed enough to sort of start making comments on something. So
well, lots of people aren't well informed, but it doesn't stop them giving their opinions as facts, which is again another personal development aspect that some people may have a desire to work on. But you obviously performed well in the group aspect. How did did you do a 1-to-1 or a 1-to-3 interview at some point as well?
So the interview was split into a presentation and then the formal interview. So there was 2 assessors with me. I was put in a room for about 15 minutes. I've been told previous that part of it would be a presentation. So again, I was thinking it's going to be some sort of fire safety talk, something about leadership. I'd actually gone in with a big fact file in my pocket, like flashcard.
Yeah.
I prepared all the stuff that I'd done in my degree, a lot of it which was actually relating to Staffordshire. I'd got key facts like incident information, numbers of calls, budgets. I was like, yeah, I'm going to be great. I can just give a presentation on fire safety. And I went in and it was, what's your biggest regret?
Oh, that is a great question.
So again, I was like, but fire engines, key information. So for the first sort of 5 minutes, I was thinking, oh, God, but you had a big flip chart, a couple of pens, couple of pieces of paper, and just left for 10-15 minutes. Someone knocked on the door and said, are you ready? So yeah, that again took me by surprise, and I was on the back foot, but I got around it. Yeah,
I think that's a great way to do it. That echoes a lot of private industry when I've done interview panels and even processes that I've done myself in different businesses when I wasn't in the fire service. I think they're the best ones to do. They're the best ones to do. I really do. I know some people listening to this might be rolling their eyes or shouting at the phone or however they're listening, because they're like, what's that got to do with the fire service? It's got to do with your ability to communicate. It's got your ability to take an unknown, seek to understand it, and then find a way to effectively articulate it to somebody that you don't know. And that's very relevant to an operational firefighter's role, from an incident ground to your crew, to all sorts of stuff. I think that's got loads of applications.
Was it Eisenhower that said all plans fail on the first bullet that flies from the enemy, something like that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think Mike Tyson took his own version, didn't he? Everyone's got a plan until they get punched in the face. Yeah,
especially if it's by Mike Tyson. Yeah.
Yeah, and you might be a very short plan after that as well.
Yeah,
like, get out of the ring quickly.
Yeah, crying one.
So you had that interview process. Part of it was the presentation, and then you presented to a couple of you say 2 people?
Yep, 2. I think they were one station manager and a group manager, I think.
Okay.
So the regrets I looked at, not getting in the fire service at first. I said, at the time I regretted it, but look what it's done now. I started volunteering. I did my degree. I'm coaching rugby, and I tried to spin it in a positive way.
Yeah, there's always a positive to be found in something like that.
Yeah, especially when it's something that I've wanted for many years, and I tried to get that point across.
So you were successful in that. How long did you have to wait to hear the feedback or hear if you'd got it or not?
Quite a while. I think it was probably just about a month or so. They said, we'll let you know week commencing this day. And up until then, if it was week commencing, it usually meant that Monday by about 2:00 in the afternoon.
Wow.
So I was refreshing my phone. Monday, nothing. I was like, Tuesday, nothing. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, nothing. I was like, oh.
Did you start to hear from anybody else? Had anybody else heard?
I had one mate who was also on the process, and he heard nothing either. So in that respect, I was a bit more like, oh, well, at least I haven't just fallen off the email list or something like that. And then 6:00 on the Friday, I had an email saying, oh, sorry, there's been a delay. I'll let you know on Monday. So,
how did that weekend go?
Do you know what? It was all right. Just put it out of my mind.
Really? That's really impressive, because I think a lot of people struggle with that.
On Sunday night, I was a mess, Don't get me wrong. And then, the Monday came. I was at work. It was just after 11ish. Went into the office, started doing my paperwork, and then I'd put all my notifications on quiet. The only thing that was going to buzz or beep was my emails.
Yeah.
Just so I would be, looking at something that I don't need to be looking at. And then, it just came through and said successful whole-time firefighter, and that was it. I couldn't believe it. It was brilliant, absolutely brilliant.
That's incredible, my man. Who was the first person you told, or did you just sit there and those years of preparation?
Well, my boss was there. I was like, Helen, I'm in. Can't believe it. I was jumping up and down. But my mum had always said, I want to be the first person, so I was ringing her. She works in the hospital, so the signal's not great. She's busy, so I was just ringing her. Rang the ward, couldn't get through, but eventually I got through. I was like, Mum, I made it! It was,
oh, man.
It was great. It was something I've waited for a while, and you always picture it, don't you? What will I be like? And it's brilliant. Can't describe it.
Surreal. So you're in that, again, because you're a COVID recruit, and I don't want to keep using that term, but that's the reason I'm using that yours has been a bit more of a drawn-out process. So not all recruitment processes will be this long, but your basic training starts next year now, which is still a long way off.
Yeah, it is, And again, that was a bit disappointing that, I've got to wait another just over a year, but then I thought it'll fly.
Yeah.
I've got plenty to keep me busy, and a year in the grand scheme of things isn't that long, is it, when you've been waiting for a while? That's
incredible, my man. So what date do you start?
It just says early 2022, so the first quarter of next year.
That'd be amazing. Absolutely amazing. So you've shared with us so many really incredible and crucial pieces of advice there. I mean, just from your studies alone, I found that bit really fascinating. What advice would you give to anybody that's about to begin a recruitment process, or maybe they're coming out of school and they want to pursue a career in the fire service? What advice would you give them looking back on the things you've done? What did you take most value from?
I think I'd say, what do you have to offer to the fire service? Everyone can say, I want to be a firefighter. I want to go around in a red fire engine with blue lights and squirt water and play dress up, but that's such a small part of the job now, especially what I found it. So what do I actually have to offer? So with my degree, I've looked at loads of different aspects. And in my interview, I actually took a big folder in where, as part of community safety, I'd done a report on latent capacity in the fire service.
Wow.
So the brief was, tell us a bit about what latent capacity is. I think, was it Knight's report, he coined the term latent capacity. And what can a firefighter do in this said latent capacity to actually prevent harm from entering the community? So Staffordshire, it's got quite an elderly population. By, I think, 2026, it's going to have one of the eldest populations in the UK. Wow. So again, that presents quite a big risk. I was looking this morning actually at my assignment, and I think since 2016, something like 54%, between 45 and 54% of all dwelling fires that occurred and resulted in a fatality have involved someone over the age of 65, which is classed as elderly vulnerable.
Yep.
So I believe about 18% of the UK population is deemed as over 65 vulnerable. But then again, you look at that, and 45 to 54% of that 18% of the population are the majority of our fatalities in dwellings. You think, well, something's not right there. There's disparity, isn't there? So I basically looked at this scheme, how we can engage the elderly. I called it Sapphire Club because I didn't want to call it, like OAP Club or something like that. I looked at the gemstone for 65 years of marriage is sapphire, and I thought, 65 sapphire, it's got a nice ring to it.
Absolutely.
So just basically looking at different ways we can get people onto station, reach out to charities, reach out to local motor companies. Can you hire us a minibus? Can we use a van just to get people to and from the station? It's all about looking at more of a holistic approach to fire safety, teaching them about tech. You can get the police in, try and avoid these Facebook scams, internet scams, cold calling, aerobics as well. I work at the Royal Voluntary Service, and during normal times when we haven't got COVID, they have knit and natter. Okay. So come in, do a bit of knitting, have a cup of tea. You can speak to people, happy, healthy lives. So it's not aerobics as we know it, when you're on holiday in the pool, but just getting moving.
So I actually did exactly that. So I did the same or very similar studies that you did, found the same results with an aging capacity, an aging population. And I put together a falls prevention course, which is effectively that. It's postural stability instructors. And then we got local members of the community brought to our fire station with a local minibus, and we would run falls prevention courses and do a from and to. So how many times have they experienced a fall in the previous 12 months at their home, and how many of those instances have resulted in hospitalization or transportation to hospital? Then we do an intervention, work on the postural stability. It's a 6-week course, and they come every week. They have some homework to do. At the end of the 6 weeks, we go and do a home safety visit as well and look at their environmental factors. And then we capture data after that. So 6 months after, 12 months after, what was the resulting effect of our intervention, and supporting them with the greater postural stability and exercises to go on for them to continue to develop that. And it was massive, made a huge impact.
Exactly. I mean, people will say, why are the fire service getting involved in falls prevention? What's that got to do with the fire service? But I think it's got absolutely everything to do. Yep. If you can get them a bit more mobile, probably a bit more, not as frightened to fall over, you can free up, it's a horrible term, but if someone was to fall over, they'd be possibly admitted into hospital. You can prevent that. You're freeing up a hospital bed, aren't you?
Yeah, and but it's not the collective cost as well. And also, if the destination that they're heading towards is a potential death in their home because they're unable to get themselves out of their home, or they don't have the stability to navigate their hallway in the event of a fire, then they're going to become a fatality statistic.
Exactly, yeah. If they fall down, they've left the cooker on, say they've left the gas on. If they're going to be on the floor it could be hours before an ambulance actually comes to pick them up, can't it?
And then it'll be even longer because they're going to ring us to go and break in for them.
Yeah, exactly. So if you can keep them a bit more mobile, a bit more confident, and it can sound a bit pedantic, but you could be preventing a fire death in the home, or at least a fire.
It's not pedantic at all, mate. It's 100%. There's a very tangible link between that, which I hope for listeners we've demonstrated that today. It's a really, really powerful thing to do. I was really proud to be able to do that and upskill some of our crews and able to do it, and I'm pretty sure it still continues today. Obviously not with COVID, but I hope it's something that comes back.
Yeah, I think there's definitely room for falls prevention and going out on maybe. I know in the West Midlands they trialled a scheme where they'd go out in some of the service vans. If firefighters were on light duty, say, they could go a pair of them. So again, the public tends to trust the fire service. You've got that badge that has very positive connotations with it. Someone is more likely to let a firefighter into the home than, say, the police,
100%. 100%.
And again, it's just about building that trust and providing value for money, really.
So you've obviously done a lot of studies and stuff like that. I've just got a few bonus questions, sort of quick fire round before we close it out, about if you had a book or a resource that you were going to give to somebody who was joining the fire service, what book or resource would you direct them to?
Well, I'd say have a look at Knight's report for sure, Facing the Future. think there's some good points there. I'm using that currently to write my dissertation. So I'm looking at the on-call system, its sustainability and its future. So again, looking at falls prevention, co-responding, different things like that. Yeah, so Ken Knight's facing the future.
What are the resource, if there was any at all? Say if it was a purchase, if somebody was going to buy something to help them get a little bit fitter or a little bit healthier and they had £50 to spend, what would you encourage them to get hold of to help them?
A Fitbit.
A Fitbit?
A Fitbit, yeah, for sure. You can measure your steps, your heart rate, your sleep. I do like my Fitbit.
Love it. So on a final one is, if you had a billboard in the sky, a proverbial billboard that sort of could display a message or a quote or something to sort of give people something that you think they need to hear right now in terms of COVID and the challenges that people are going through, or just a message that you would want to share, what would you put on it?
I think I'd put, where are the 1%, especially with firefighter recruitment and my studies, I've tried to find just 1% difference. If I can do just 1% more than someone else who's going for the same job, if you split that up into 10 different sections, that's 10% already.
Love it.
Like asking Dr. Sabrina Cohen-Hatton just for an interview, that's just 1 little percent. It took me about 20 seconds to draft the message, and in the end it accounted for a lot more than just 1%.
100%.
So it accounted for,
yeah. It's that marginal gains approach. I love that, and it's something I apply to all aspects of my life.
Because if you said to someone, "Oh, can you do this work for me?" They go, "Oh yeah," and then they say, "Oh, actually, can you just do 10% more or 20% more?" It's a big ask, isn't it?
Yeah.
Whereas if you said, "Oh, can you just do 1% more?" It's nothing, is it? It's negligible. But over time, you get 1% there, 1% there. You spread that out over a year, and you could be leagues above what you could have been.
It's the same approach I do with learning, with personal development, just trying to listen to 10 minutes of an audiobook every day, and do it with diet and nutrition, just trying to have one less spoonful of something, or don't have sauce on the thing you're having today, or don't try and drink 4 liters a day. Could you just drink 1 glass of water extra a day? Would that be achievable for you? And just go for that 1% gain. Yeah,
just taking 5 minutes out of your day just to, stare out the window, go for a walk, listen to a song you like. Just makes a big difference in the long run for me, yeah.
Massive. Ben, thank you so much for coming on and sharing what I think is a really, really powerful rundown of some of the adventures and journeys you've had that have now taken you to your successful whole-time recruitment. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to do that, my man.
No, thanks for having me, Pete. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Really look forward to speaking to you next year as you begin your career, and I'm sure in the next few years I'll see you at the big one.
Hopefully, yeah. Cheers for the opportunity, mate.
Take care, brother. I'll speak to you soon.
And you. Try, matey. Bye.
That was my really rich and deep conversation with Ben Kelly. What an articulate dude. Dude sounds like he's a station manager already. That level of knowledge that he's gained from his studies is going to put him in such incredible standing as he moves into his whole-time career. Hope you enjoyed it. I hope you took a couple of pages and notes. If you didn't, get back there and write them down again. And if you are somebody that's applying for the fire service or any emergency services, feel free to reach out to us. It can be a really difficult process, leveraging perseverance, persistence, confidence, resourcefulness to get everything you need to put yourself in the best standing possible to be recruited into the job that, if you're like me, you've been dreaming of since you were a kid. So good luck, stick at it, ask for help. Shy kids don't get sweets, remember? And I sincerely hope that future episodes like Ben's can support and help you with that inspiration, that motivation, that curiosity, and hopefully some tangible tools to go away and implement. That's our gift to you as a big, massive thank you for coming back right here and joining us on the Firefighters Podcast.